guys, happy weekend. I hope you're having a good time. I'm not going to take up too much of your time, I promise. It's going to be really short. I just want you to get out a sheet of paper so you can take a couple notes, because we're going to be doing quite a few presentations in class, and I want you to know some tips to help you do really well on those presentations. The first presentation we're going to start working on next week, and it's going to be in a partner presentation, and it's going to be 100 points, okay? Each presentation we do is 100 points, and because it's grading you on all of the speaking and listening standards that you have to hit in 9th grade. So we're going to talk about how you can successfully do this and what some of the tips are that will help you get a great grade on this presentation. Okay, so one thing that you should remember for your presentation is that you should be looking at your audience. Notice how I haven't broken eye contact once yet, which you can break eye contact, you could span the room and things like that, but you need to actually be presenting to us, not turned towards the board like this, not leaning against the board like this, not like reading from the board like this, but you need to be ready to show off the presentation that you put up here, but you're also presenting to the class, okay? So that's tip number 1. Make sure to turn and present. And you think people would remember this because it's called a presentation, but they don't really. Sometimes they forget. They start looking at the board, they stop looking out at the audience, and that's one thing that takes their grade down. Okay, another thing that you need to remember is that you kind of need to keep your body still when you're up here. I know that I talk with my hands, and it's okay to talk with your hands, but you really need to not be like fidgeting with your clothes, or shoving your hands in your pockets, or like playing with your hair, with your face, or chewing on your nails, or like walking around and pacing, or things like that. You really need to be up here, confident about your topic, presenting out to the rest of the class. So tip number 2 is to keep your body still. Okay, tip number 3 is to be confident about what you're talking about. You and your partner are going to have a chance to research your topic. So you have the authority on what you're telling the rest of the class. You're teaching the class. So you need to be confident about what you're saying, make sure you're loud enough so that they can hear you, and you're not just up here mumbling, and you're really quiet, and they can't understand what you're saying. So tip number 3 is to be confident and tip number 4 is be able to be heard. Okay, those are good tips for how you actually present when you're presenting up here, for how you should hold your body, how you need to do things like that. But let's talk about some tips for the actual PowerPoint presentation, or if you're going to do a poster or anything like that, that's fine. But there are some tips for that we also need to remember. Okay, number 1 is, if you do a PowerPoint or if you do a poster, anything that you want to be visually interesting to the rest of the class, you need to not put sentences of text on the PowerPoint slides or on the poster, because then what the class is doing is they're just reading your PowerPoint or reading your poster and not really listening to you present, okay? So what you really want to try to do, what you want to aim for, is putting bullet points on the PowerPoint or the poster, whatever you choose to use, and then you're going to stand up here and you're going to present based off of those bullet points. Okay, so you could say like bullet point number 1, you could have a picture of the person that you're researching, and you could have a bullet point that says early life. And then what you would do is you would stand up here and you would say, this picture shows this person in this stage of their life. They were born here and lived here and grew here and things like that. But what you're doing is you're presenting pictures instead of saying, oh, they were born in Montgomery, Alabama, and they grew up in, okay, you do not want to just read from your slides. You do not want that much information on your slides, because you want people paying attention to you. You are presenting to them, okay? So we're going to change this board up a little bit to make sure that you have your notes on this, okay? This was tips for presenting. Now we're going to do tips for the supplemental piece, which is AKA your PowerPoint or your poster or whatever you choose to use. So tip number 1, do not use sentences of text. Okay? Then the next tip is use bullet points and then branch off of those. So use bullet points as starting points. And then you're going to present to us based off of these bullet points. Okay? Another tip is that it's really good to use things like pictures, or if you wanted to put a timeline up here, or you had a video clip of something, or you had something that was sound-wise, because you want to make your presentation visually interesting to the audience so that they're paying attention and they're getting all the information in that they need. Okay, so use pictures or something like that to make visually interesting. Okay, you also want to make sure that whatever you are using text-wise on your PowerPoint is able to be seen from the back of the room. So you want to make sure that you have it large enough and in a font and color that people can see, that they're not struggling to read, okay? So another point is that make text visible. I always have people ask me if they can bring note cards up here and go from notes, and that is perfectly fine. I understand when people get nervous and they lose their train of thought, and you're able to do that, but what I don't want to see is you standing up here and just reading from your notes like this and not actually looking up and presenting to the crowd. You need to actually present your information. So you need to practice ahead of time so that you know what's coming next, you know what you're saying, you know how to pronounce the words, and you don't get all flustered when you're up here and get lost in your notes. Okay, so another tip is to practice. I'm writing this one in bold because we've all heard that phrase that practice makes perfect, and that's what you need to be doing for your presenting to the class. Now, the one last thing that I have to tell you is that when you're presenting, based on our rubric for speaking and listening, it says that you need to mention where you took your information from. So this is a research project, so you are going to have sources. First of all, having a works cited page at the end is a great idea, just so that we can know, hey, this is where I took it from. But more so, what you also need to do is throughout, you need to say, if you have a piece of information, say where they grew up, you could say, according to such and such journal, this person grew up in Montgomery, Alabama, okay? So you need to mention throughout the PowerPoint where you took your information, okay? It's one part of the standard, and a lot of people miss it because they forget to do things like that. So it's a good idea to have works cited at the end, but you also need to mention your sources throughout. Mention your sources. Okay. So, when you present, not next week, but the week after we've worked on these presentations a little bit, I expect that you will have practiced, that you're ready to go with your supplemental piece, and that you have taken these tips seriously so that you know what will get you a good grade on this, okay? I know you can do this. I know you'll do great. I hope you took notes. Make sure that you go and mark this video as done after you have finished watching it, and that's all I have for you. I told you it wouldn't take that long. So I hope you have a great rest of the weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Happy weekend!